Well, that was a little abrupt, but good morning, everyone. This is Mike Dane with MLS Technology. Today, we're going to be discussing Transaction Desk. Before we get started with the actual course content, though, I did want to run through just a couple things here. First and foremost, everybody will be starting on mute by default. There is a Q&A button down at the bottom of the screen so that if you do end up having any questions, you guys can ask them down there. I also wanted to mention as well that there is a chat section instead, but wanted to just clarify the Q&A section does kind of make it obvious that there's a question that's been asked. The chat section is not quite so obvious. So if you guys do end up posting any questions in the chat, I might not notice that as quickly as if it were put into the Q&A. Speaking of chat, let me get it unlocked. Thank you, Zoom, for always locking it, I guess. But Any commentary you guys would like to add, stories you'd like to share, make sure you post those into the chat section. Now, if you guys do end up having any audio or video issues during this course, please make sure to let me know immediately. Whether I, for whatever reason, go on mute, which happened recently. But hopefully we shouldn't have any issues today. I got the headset charged and everything's plugged in properly. So smooth sailing, fingers crossed. But if you guys do end up having any issues, please let me know immediately. You may not be the only one that's experiencing the issue, so we want to ensure that everybody's able to see everything, hear everything, and get the CE credit. Now, as for the CE credit, I did want to mention that we will be sending this off today. I am going to be using this as a training opportunity for our new trainer. In case you guys haven't heard, we have a new outreach trainer that we're going to be training up over the next month or two. So we should have him ready to go by, I'm hoping, June. His name is Josh. He is awesome. I'm very excited. He's going to be great. But we're going to get that CE credit sent off today. You guys should see that applied to your account before the end of the month. But again, any delays in that regard, please let us know. Our education director, Jessica, should be able to check into that stuff for you. She's also the one that sends stuff in, so she'll know for sure whether or not it's been sent off to OREC. The buttons are fairly simple, just to run through those real quick. Again, chat is going to be where you guys can post any commentary, stories you would like to share, etc. Q&A is going to be better reserved for the questions that you guys would have, or if you guys can't post in chat, you guys are having any kind of like audio or video issues, post it into Q&A, hit the raise hand button, give us a call at the service desk, whatever it takes. We don't want you guys to miss out on CE credit just because some technical issue. But the raise hand button is also how we're going to be polling people to make sure everybody's still present. But also, if you guys do end up having any questions you would like to ask with your voice, you can do so through that raise hand button. Just hit the button, I'll see your hand up, we'll get you unmuted, you should be good to go. All right, if you guys are joining us on a mobile device, just as a heads up, you do need to tap the screen in order for the buttons to appear. So if you do end up joining with a tablet of some kind or a phone of some kind, which tablet, probably fine. Phone, if you don't mind holding it up to your face the whole time, that's fine. It might be a little difficult to see some of the stuff that we'll be doing today, but for the most part, it should work on mobile. But just tap the screen and you'll see all those same buttons. So don't miss out just because you guys are on a mobile device and I ask to have you guys raise your hand or something. But that should be about it. I've got our contact information up on the screen right now. In case you guys weren't aware of this, we do have a service desk that's available to you Monday through Friday, 8 to 5:30. So if you guys do end up needing any assistance, trouble with the system, or just guidance on how to use things, just give us a call, let us know, send us an email even after hours. If there's an outage of some kind, we'll typically be checking that email anyway, so just let us know. All right, it's 9:05. Let's go ahead and get started with the actual content. I'm going to be launching a poll. It's very, very simple, so don't worry. It's not going to take a lot of brain power, but everybody who is present now and participates in the poll will be eligible for CE credit. So make sure that you guys answer that poll. Oh, that's everybody. Excellent. Really quick this time. I appreciate it, guys. All right. So are you new to real estate? We've got one person that for sure is yes. A couple people who said that they are relatively new, but looks like the majority of you guys are actually not new. So we'll try and make sure that we at least keep some context for those of you who are new. I just want to make sure that you guys know why we're using certain functions, what they might be used for. But for those of you guys who are veterans, hopefully we'll be giving you guys some enlightenment on some of the other features that you may not have known about or been using. As for what you guys are currently using, it looks like most of you guys are actually already using Transaction Desk. We got a couple people who are using DocuSign, and then a .loop and a SkySlope user. Now, there is actually one difference between the transaction desk system and .loop specifically that we'll highlight whenever we get to it, but in the interim, we're good to go. We'll just go ahead and start up. All right. Oh, and I should mention, this is a 2-hour-long class. We will be taking a break in the middle of it just to ensure that you guys get an opportunity to not have to listen to me for 2 straight hours, but take a break, make calls, take a bathroom break, whatever you need. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Now, as we mentioned with the poll kind of circuitously, we are going to be going through Transaction Desk as a system where you guys can pull up forms, get them filled out, and then get that off to be signed. So this is a form filling and document signing system that's entirely digital. This is also going to be the system that you guys will be using to store any of your disclosures for any listings that you put into Matrix. We'll cover that at the very end of class, but for now, if you guys are just getting signed in and would like to know how to get into Transaction Desk, there's actually a couple ways to do so. Since most of the time people find themselves just opening up Matrix and just leaving this as kind of their base of operations, I'm going to point out over on the right-hand side here on my screen, but it can be anywhere on your screen. There's going to be a section called External Links. Under it, there's going to be a button for Transaction Desk. You can either click on this one to go to Transaction Desk, or if you guys are still on that home page, the MLS portal as we call it, there's going to be a link here for Transaction Desk as well. Once you guys have gotten into Transaction Desk, it should land you on a home page where there's going to be a series of buttons over on the left-hand side. There's going to be a home page here where there's going to be several widgets. You might notice that this is pretty similar to how Matrix is laid out, where there's a bunch of widgets, and these on Matrix at least can be moved around, put in different positions, collapsed, closed, etc. With Transaction Desk, the things are actually still able to be moved around, but they do require you guys to unlock them before you can do so. So up at the top right corner here, there's going to be a lock, unlock dashboard. Before we get into any of that, you may notice that there's some green bars that are popping up. I'm going to close out of that so I can have more of my screen real estate back. I'm also going to put us into a full screen view. Don't worry, this is just trying to make sure that the only thing we're seeing on the screen is Transaction Desk's webpage. You don't have to do that on your end. That's just to give you guys some clarity on what just changed. But since I want to make some changes to the layout that we have here on our homepage, I'm going to click this little lock icon up at the top right. This opens up a tray underneath the agent dashboard header where we can see all of the different options that we would like to add. Now you're going to notice that there's a couple things that are already on here. We've got a create transaction button, create signing button, which apparently I have 2 of. Get rid of one of those. We also have a transactions section, which is going to be indicated here, and the forms indicated here. So from what we're gathering from here, it looks like these buttons are actually going to be correlating to these gray options. And any of the ones that I would like to add are going to be these blue buttons. So if I want to make a new contact that I'm going to be working with, I'm going to click and drag and then drop that down to where I would like for it to go. Same thing goes if I would like to keep track of my signings, just drop that there. If I wanted to check on where my checklists are for certain things, I can add the checklists. But all of these are actually going to be a little bit malleable. So where the buttons are just kind of things that you guys can move into positions and that's it. There is no real adjustment needed on them. With the transactions or forms or Authentisign or any of these other list options, we can actually adjust more than just the position of them. If I wanted to increase how long my transactions list is, I could just click and drag from the bottom edge to make that a little bit longer list. You can also do the same thing if you guys would like to make something wider. So I don't see the full name of this signing, so I might want to just grab the edge of this and drag that a little bit wider. So now I can see a little bit more of what exactly was being discussed in that particular signing. As always, I know if any of you guys have been to my classes before, I always harp on this, but I can't stress enough how valuable it can be to optimize your workspace. Make sure that you guys are actually putting the things that are most important to you in the most obvious and easy to access place whenever you guys first get into a system. So whether you guys are doing this in Matrix or whether you're doing it in Transaction Desk like we are right now, make sure that your screen real estate is occupied by the things that are the most important to you so that you can just dive directly back into whatever work you're needing to do. Now, once I've gotten everything arranged to the way that I would like it, say I wanted to add in another button, so I've got a nice filled workspace here, I can click on this padlock again to now lock everything down so that if I click and drag, I'm no longer accidentally moving anything. I don't have to worry about accidentally making things larger or smaller, whatever the case may be. Now, that's about it for our coverage of the main page here. Over on the left-hand side, I did want to point out that there are a series of icons. These are labeled so that if you guys hold your cursor over them, you can at least see what they're supposed to be labeled. But since mine is kind of showing up underneath my cursor, it's not really very helpful. So instead, I'm actually going to click this little menu button up at the top left that expands that out so I can see what each of these are labeled. Now, the majority of the time, I've recommended people to just get onto the dashboard and then use this as your starting base. I don't typically recommend people to navigate too many other directions here on the left, but the other one that I might suggest people to go to from time to time is going to be this transactions list. This is going to be a complete list of every single transaction you guys have ever worked with. So it's an easy way to kind of find things that you might have been working on much previous to right now. Like if I'm, several transactions deep, this is going to require me to kind of keep scrolling and scrolling and loading and loading. If the thing that I'm needing to work on right now is right here, perfect. If I scroll down, I should be able to see the others, or I can visit this transactions link and see all of them at once. The signings, forms, documents, and the rest of the stuff that we saw over here on the left isn't going to be quite as important yet. I'm going to discuss how we can navigate to signings and forms and documents, but from the perspective of a specific transaction, rather than starting us off with just, diving into a signing with no context whatsoever, no details added in or anything ready to go. Now, to that point, I wanted to actually talk first about how to actually create a transaction. Now, the transactions are going to allow us to take all of the details, all of the forms, all of the documents, and put them into one spot for us. So if you guys are trying to think about what this actually is doing for us, just think of this as like a manila folder. We're going to gather all of our content, put it into one folder, and when you guys hit that create a transaction button, we're going to be making that folder and giving it a name for that folder right up here at the top. Now notice when we're creating a transaction, it's literally the only thing that's required is just getting in a name. There's a whole school of thought on how to actually name things. If it were me and I were actually putting these in as a real transaction, I would first want to know who it is that I'm going to be working with, because maybe I'm going to be working with them again. I'm going to want to have the address as well. So let's just do Hamilton. And then I'm also going to put in their address, because if I work with them again, I need a different address. But if I'm going to be working on the same property again, let's say from the perspective of a buyer, I might want to know that that's going to be buyer's name and that same address rather than the seller's name and that same address. So 7 Main Street, and that'll work for me. So got my last name, who I'm interacting with, got my property that I'm interacting with. It'll be nice and clear for me the next time I get in. Now there's a section here for template. This is one that you guys may not actually see. All of these are templates that either I have made or my office has made for me. If you do not have any templates that you've made or your office has made, this section just simply won't show up. Now, we're going to talk about how to actually create the templates at the end of class, because I think that this is probably one of the best parts about Transaction Desk. You need to make some templates, use them a couple times, and you'll see exactly why this is so important. But the next section down is going to be our type. This is actually something that we may want to apply even if we're not going to be using a template. This is going to allow me to know that I've got, in my case, a residential listing that we're going to be doing our example today. So when I clicked on residential listing, it's effectively informing me that this particular transaction is going to be done from this perspective. Because it recognizes that this is a listing that I am putting in, there's a section down here at the bottom that automatically changed to listing agent. So now I know I got my seller, my address, I changed my type to residential listing, so I will be their listing agent. So we got a pretty cohesive set of information, even just from square one. There is one last detail that we can add in if we would like, and that's going to be importing data. Now, there's a couple different ways for us to do that. We can either import data directly from the MLS using an MLS number, or we can actually use the tax record information. Now, the MLS number is really simple. You put the number in, easy peasy. Realist, on the other hand, is a little bit different. We'll have to choose which county we're going to be using and then enter the tax parcel number. So if you guys have already done your research on this property, maybe you guys were doing that during your CMA or whatever the case may be, and you guys have that tax parcel number already, you can just dump that in there, good to go. If not, there is actually a tax search function over here that allows you guys to get a little bit more information. It is going to be pulling details directly over from Realist. So if you do have some of the information, but you didn't have that tax parcel number already, you guys can run the search here, no problem. Now, in my case, I actually want to start with just a completely blank transaction. So I'm going to leave this back on select source. So it's not going to be using anything from an extra source of information. At the very bottom of the page, though, there is a use wizard checkbox. I'm not going to mess with that. I would very strongly recommend that you guys use the wizard. And I'll illustrate why when I hit create. Another nice thing that I like before we actually hit that button, nice big buttons. Everything is typically going to be pretty big and legible. They don't really try to make things like small and a bunch of minute little buttons all over the place. So hit that big create button. Yep. And here's another little green bar for me to get rid of. Now, when we first get into this, after we hit create with that checkbox for use wizard, it started me off on a wizard and I've got step 1 of 5. This is where it's going to start asking me some of the details. If I had used the import function from either Matrix or Realist, a lot of this information may already have been filled in for me. Because I did not, I'm going to be starting off with just a completely blank screen, so I'm going to have to manually add in some of my details, like right, there's my street number, street address. We'll do Tulsa. Actually, how about not Tulsa today? Tahlequah. Go. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. All right. For that column, it's just address information, really basic. I'm going to skip over to this column real quick. This transaction status is actually being mirrored up at the top here. This is actually something that we can go back and change at will, no matter pretty much what category we happen to be in. This header that we see up here at the top will kind of drift with us. But the transaction status that we're seeing here is going to be something that's a little different than what we're seeing in other systems that we give you guys access to. You'll notice a lot of the familiar options like active, closed, expired, pending, withdrawn, but there are going to be 2 extras. One is the open that we're on right now. This is effectively the limbo state that a transaction will remain in until the property has been listed and has gone active. We also have another end of the spectrum. So rather than it being the very beginning of a transaction, we have the very end of a transaction. So after the property is closed, we've got all the filed paperwork, everything is done, signed, complete, no longer needing to keep track of it. We can move this over into a closed file complete, which effectively is just saying that this is now archival. It's not something that we need to interact with. We're good to go. But I'm going to leave mine on open. I'm going to put in a legal description. We'll see why in a bit here. Just to get something in there. All right. And a little bit further down, we're going to have listing information or purchase information. Now, the listing information in my case, the only thing I need to actually put in on this particular property is going to be what my price estimate will be. Let's see, 1,000, million, billion. Okay, perfect. Got a nice property. We're going to try and sell it to Bill Gates when he comes to visit. Click next. And we've got our transaction dates. Now, this is step 2 of 5. So we're just moving through that wizard again with these next and previous buttons. I'm going to go ahead and put in my list date as today and my expiration date as tomorrow. Here today, gone tomorrow. Now, one thing that's going to be following us until we get to that final step is going to be the save and exit button. In fact, if I go back to my previous step, it's at the very, very, very bottom of that. This is going to just keep on floating with us the entire time. This is effectively the ripcord for this particular process. So if I'm working through my wizard, I'm almost done with this, and suddenly I get a phone call to go out and do a showing. If I need to just save what I've gotten so far and just exit out, I can hit save and exit. It's going to preserve all the information that I got, and I can leave, come back to transaction desk a little bit later. And would you look at that? My transaction that I created right now is already at the top of my transactions list. So I can just click back into that. And then right up here at the top right corner is the wizard. So I can effectively just dive right back into wherever it was that I left off. So really easy. Again, I don't see too many people actually using this, but it's important to know that it at least is there for you if you need it. But I'm done with step 2. I got my dates that I need in for now. I'm going to click next. And this brings us to our contacts. Now, the contacts page is fairly important. This is oftentimes where people start making mistakes on their data entry. So I did want to clarify a couple things before we get too far into this. The contacts is going to actually take the information that we put in here and start populating that information automatically on any of the forms that we're going to be adding in just a moment on step 4. Now, what that means is that I need to make sure that I've got as much of the information about these contacts and put that in right now. So rather than putting this in later or having to clean up a bunch of stuff because I didn't put in something or I didn't put the right category or I didn't do this or that, try and think of this step 3 where we're putting in our contacts as a very important step, not just something to fill in so that you can do more later. Because we do have lots of people call in and they have trouble with the forms or they have trouble with signings. And oftentimes it's just that we need to get them to go back and correct something in their contacts. So take this very seriously when you guys start adding them. Now, when you click on add, there's going to be a few options on here. Some of these are fairly simple. If I've already gotten a contact, I can do it. If I didn't have myself added as a listing agent or selling agent, I can add myself. Or if you guys have contacts in your Gmail or Google account, you guys can import those. For me, I need to actually just create a new transaction contact. This is the most common button people are using, so we'll start there. It starts us off with asking for what our type is. This is going to define where on all of the forms their name will start to appear. If I click on a seller, in this case, it's going to automatically put the seller's information, whoever I put down here, on all of the forms that require the seller's information. So fairly simple. Any of you guys who have used .loop, SkySlope, Transaction Desk, DocuSign, Zip Forms, whatever, you guys are probably familiar with that, but just keep that in mind. Take this very seriously. So Alexander, and here we go. Give them an email address, and we're set. Now, when we're adding somebody into the transactions, there's a little checkbox down here at the very bottom that says add to address book. If you guys are following along or just doing this as a practice run for yourself later, uncheck that checkbox for address book if this is not meant to be a real person. Very clearly, this is not the name of the person that's connected to this email address, but just keep that in mind. You guys can choose whether to keep them on your permanent address book or not. So if this is a one-off and you guys don't plan on interacting with this particular client again, you can just uncheck that checkbox. Now there is one extra piece of information that we can add. So beyond just putting in their name, their legal name, etc., we can also go over here to the address and we can put in whatever their address information is. All of this contact information and address details will start filling in on the appropriate places on whatever forms ask for it. Now, to save us some trouble, because we actually chose them as a seller on that general tab, it added in a separate checkbox for me up here at the top. So if I were on a buyer, it wouldn't even offer me this option. I would have to manually fill all this in. But because this is the seller, there is the anticipation that it might be an owner occupant. So I can check that checkbox and all my detail gets added in right away. Now back to our general tab. One last thing to mention about this, when you guys are adding contacts into the system, if you have somebody that's representing a business, this is another really frequent mistake and something that people call in about often. When you're adding in an individual that represents a business, the business name should go under where it says legal name. The person that's actually going to be signing for the business still needs to have their first name, middle name, last name entered in under the name category. The legal name, on the other hand, is going to be maybe the business. There we go. And then we can put the preferred signature of whoever it is that's actually going to be signing down here. So just to clarify again, if you guys have a trust, a business, or just a group that's going to be signing, and you have a representative from that group or organization, you guys can put the organization's name here, and all the details about the person signing are going to be elsewhere. Oftentimes we'll see people that'll put in, the name of the company split up and then have some preferred signature is going to be some individual's name. That's not the way that this is intended. We need to know who it is that's actually going to be signing, and then what their signature is going to be defined down here. Whatever organization they sign up at or signing as needs to be under the legal name. But anyway. All right, so now we've got that put in. Because we actually put in the legal name, it's actually going to show the legal name here. If we were to click on this person's information again, we can go back and make some changes. I'm going to clear that out, save, and notice now it goes back to the seller's name, so the actual individual. But let's get Alex's wife in there. Here's your random history pop quiz. Anybody happen to know what Alexander Hamilton's wife's name was? You can post it into the chat section. Man, no guesses even? Nobody even Googled it? All right, well, it's Elizabeth, by the way. All right, and she's going to be our other seller, Hamilton. What's her name? Mrs. Hamilton. Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the thing in that era. All right, and we'll just say that she signs as Liz Hamilton, because it's the modern era. She's her own person now, right? All right. Again, if I had chosen something besides seller, we wouldn't have this option, but I can check the checkbox and her information will fill in. But I'm happy with what I got. Let's go ahead and save her information. So we've got both of them and we're all set. All right, so now that we're done with our contact information, we're going to again click next. And this brings us to our forms. Now, just like in so many of the other systems that you guys were using besides Transaction Desk, what this is going to be doing is giving us interactive forms for us to be able to use. So when we're looking at these forms, I can click on the Add button, and it's going to pull up a list of all of the folders that we've categorized all of our individual forms into. Now, the vast majority of these folders are just going to be regionally specific collections. That doesn't necessarily mean that you guys can't use them. In fact, actually, if I click on, for instance, this 801, you're going to notice a lot of these things are just kind of the generic options that are coming directly from OREC. But if we are just wanting to, dive into just the residential forms, since this is a residential property, we can click on that and start gathering the forms that we need. But as you guys notice, there's a lot of these. This is just a lot for me to have to sort through if I'm trying to find a very specific form. So what we typically recommend people to do is up here at the top right, there's going to be a search function. So I want to first grab my exclusive right to sell. So I'm going to type in exclusive. Okay. This narrowed it down for the most part. I can see up here at the top, I've got an OREC listing agreement, exclusive right to sell. That might be the form that I'm interested in using, but notice it's actually got a folder indicated underneath it that says ADA. I want to go down to just the one that's under the generic folder. So my residential contracts and forms, here's the GTAR version, here's my OREC version. Now, something interesting to notice about our system as we have it right now, when I check this checkbox, it automatically checked another checkbox down below it. Now, up here at the top right, I'm going to see a basket that indicates to me what forms I've already chosen. So I can click on my basket to view what I've added, but I see that I've only got one version of that form put in, despite the fact that I've got a spare checkbox here, and look at that, the ADA one also got checked. This is just indicating to us that this is actually a duplicate form. We don't have to worry about this being a problem. Again, just keep track of what's happening in that basket so that you know if there's any spare checkboxes that got checked whenever you clicked on one of them. That just means that it's the same form in multiple places. Let's do the same thing now with our disclosure of lead-based paint. So I can type in disclosure. We're going to talk a little bit later about the agent interactive versus client interactive on the property condition disclosure. But for now, I'm actually just looking for the lead-based paint, which is, disclosure of information on lead-based paint. That's the one I'm looking for. I'm going to check my checkbox. Oh, wait, actually, no, I'm looking for this one, the sales one. My mistake. There we go. So I checked my checkbox. Again, my basket only increased by one number, so I've only got 2 items in there, despite the fact that I got another checkbox down here and another checkbox up here. All right, last item. I'm going to do a blank addendum, type in blank, and we'll just use this generic one. All right. Again, if I need to double check what I've selected so far, click the basket, got my information. I can remove them if need be, but I'm happy. I click on add, and I'm good to go. Now, we have seen some people just start to try and immediately fill these out by clicking on the actual names of these, and you can start that process immediately if you'd like. But remember, we're actually not quite done with our wizard. So click on next, and that'll bring us to our documents. Now, the difference between the forms and the documents as far as Transaction Desk is concerned, forms is going to be any of the stuff that's actually interactive. Documents, on the other hand, is going to be static information that's effectively either just scanned documents or things that are already done that you've gotten onto your computer. So I'm going to click on the Add button. This is going to work a little different this time because it's not actually looking for something that's already in the system. This is asking for you to upload something. Now, there's a few different ways for us to do this. I can either just upload directly from my computer here. I can also use a third-party option if you guys have Dropbox or Google Drive or OneDrive or Box. I think really the only 2 that I see people using nowadays are these 2, but either way, we've got options. There's also an option to upload these from an email. So you can actually just send a email to a very specific transaction-specific email, and it'll just show up under our documents. You can also create a contact for that particular email address. We don't cover those too deeply in class, but for those of you guys who work through email a lot, that's a really easy option. But I'm going to upload directly from my computer. Click on Upload. Opens up a nice folder for me. I'm going to grab this filed plat that I have and hit Open. There we go. So I've got my filed plat added. This is a new construction property, so I need them to know like what lot they're on or what property they're going to be on, whatever the case may be. All right, so I'm done with my documents. I'm on the final step. There is no save and exit anymore because now we just click Done. Now we're back to our transaction dashboard. If you guys remember, that save and exit button brought us here before, but now we're actually done with all of our information. So we can start filling in forms and getting stuff up to be, getting stuff ready to be signed. So I wanted to clarify something before we start navigating away from this transaction dashboard. One of the biggest problems that we have and oftentimes I think the most common phone call that we have is that people are trying to either start signings from the wrong location, or they're trying to add contacts in the wrong location. Whenever you guys actually open up a transaction, and either from your home page or from that transactions button, once you've landed on this transaction dashboard, there's going to be that menu over here on the side where we saw wizard. This is going to be the navigation for this particular transaction over here on the right. Oftentimes we'll see people that dive into transaction desk and they try to start a transaction or try to start a signing, excuse me, and they got a form and they're like, well, why isn't it filling out? Or why aren't my contacts showing up? Or why aren't my, et cetera, et cetera. The reason why is because they're actually trying to do that from either the signing where there is no transaction set up, or they're trying to fill in a form, but that's not attached to a transaction. If you guys get into a transaction, all of your content is going to be over here on the right-hand side. So I can go and change my contacts from here, and go and update my forms from here, check on any signings that I've sent off, any of the documents that I've uploaded. All of this is going to be specific to this transaction. So your navigation is over here on the right-hand side. Now, since we're ready to just go ahead and start filling out forms and getting them sent off to be signed, I'm going to click on Forms. And we'll start off with our exclusive right to sell. When you click on the title of the form, it's going to bring you into an editing page. This is where we can start making changes to this particular form, but you're going to see a lot of details have actually already been filled out thanks to the work that we did during that wizard phase. So my property address already showing up here. That legal description that I put in already showing. I've got my list price, my list date, expiration date. And if I scroll all the way to that last page, I can see that I've already got my company information in, my sellers are put in, and their mailing address. Easy peasy. Now, there's a couple different things that we need to talk about when you guys are looking at the forms, though. Beyond some of the stuff that had already been filled in, there's going to be some extra blue spaces where we can add some further details. Now, not every single one needs to be filled out. This is all going to be something that's defined by what form you happen to be looking at. But I'm going to go ahead and put in a couple pieces of information. Since this is $1 billion property, I'm going to really try and milk the commission out of this so I can maybe retire, because imagine. Anyway, or we can put in some extra numbers here. To sell the property within 1 day. And actually down here towards the bottom, another option that we need to discuss. Checkboxes are going to be appearing occasionally. You might need to check some of these checkboxes, but if there is an either or option like this is or is not, does or does not, yes or no, it's not going to let you choose contradictory terms. So you're not going to accidentally say yes and no. It'll just require you to do one or the other. Another thing to mention is that any of the details that we have on here, so for instance, maybe I accidentally added in an extra zero, it was supposed to be $100,000 or $100 million instead of $1 billion. Just take one of those zeros off. And what's really nice about this is that any of the details that I change on this page are actually going to percolate back to the details that I have and subsequently fill out on all the other forms. So for instance, if I change my date that I have here, maybe put it towards the end of the month instead of just tomorrow. Now I've given myself a little bit more time, got that whole 10 days to finish this in. What that means is that any of the other forms that are also going to be looking for the expiration date will now have the corrected, updated expiration date. So don't worry about it. We used to have a problem with that occasionally where people would fill in out a form and they're like, well, why doesn't this fill back the other information? It will now. Thankfully, they updated that. Last thing to mention before we move on from this particular form is going to be the dates that appear on here. So for instance, this accepted this blank day of blank blank. If I click on this calendar button, it's just going to automatically fill in the information the way that this particular form is requesting it. All right, now I've gotten all my information filled in. If there was anything else that I needed to do here, I can do so real quick. Put that at $1 billion. It's always nice to dream about it, you know. But once you guys have actually filled in all of this information, there's a couple different ways for us to either save it or leave this area. If I go up to this file button, which if you guys are zoomed in enough, it actually loses the actual label for it, but I'm trying to keep everything zoomed in so it's a little bit more legible. But the file icon is going to just be this little folder. There's going to be a save option under here where you guys can just save the details that you've done. It automatically should save some of the information every couple minutes, but for those of you guys who've been in the industry long enough, a couple minutes to spend on a form might seem like a lifetime. So I usually recommend to people just hit that save button anyway, just to make sure that you guys have gotten it saved. I'm also very paranoid that I'm going to lose something. I had a hard drive fail on me in college, and that was, wow, almost a couple decades ago. But anyway, it's left a little mental scar on me. I've been traumatized by losing, what, like 3 or 4 semesters worth of content. It was, so I've always saved. I love cloud storage. Now, the other option to save and exit something is going to be up the top right here. There's a save and exit button. When we click on save and exit, that actually brings us back to where we've got our forms. Now, I'm going to go ahead and click on this disclosure of lead-based paint. This one's going to be a lot easier for me to fill out because would you look at that? There's nothing for me to actually fill out on this. I just need to verify that it's got their names in there, the right spots, got the details in there. I'm happy. Now, rather than clicking on the save and then hitting the save and exit, or even just hitting that save and exit to get out of here, I'm going to click on this transaction forms button. This actually pulls up a list of all the forms that I've already gotten added to my transaction. So instead of having to click save and exit, then click on another title, click on transaction forms, click on blank addendum, and I'm just immediately into the next form. I don't have to worry about loading a whole separate web page just to be able to click on to the next form. Now that we're looking at our addendum, this is going to be showing us a bunch of blank blue space. And then down here towards the very bottom, we're even seeing some spaces down here that have not been automatically filled out because these particular sections are not defined by who's actually going to be putting in their signature the way that like the seller was being requested or the buyer was being requested. So I would have to manually click on these blue spaces and actually add in Alex Hamilton, Liz Hamilton, and we're set. Now, the section above where we've got this gigantic blank space with these lines, the lines that we see under here are meant for just people that are putting this in by hand. So when I start typing on this, so click on it, selects it, it actually clears out all of those lines below. If any of you guys happen to remember back in the day when you had to do the typewriters on those, that was my specialty. I probably informed my decision to study graphic design in college, but I was the one that always got put into, you have to line up the text that the typewriter is going to be putting so that it doesn't accidentally interfere with these lines. What an absolute nuisance. I'm definitely glad we're in the future now. But what you can do is just start typing and it'll clear out those lines for you. Now there's also a new system that they've recently set up that allows us to actually take these sections where there's, you know, huge swaths of text space available, and you can actually add in clauses. So rather than having to manually type in the same clause every single time or have some copy paste system set up, you guys can actually just save those directly in here. And that way we can just come back later and just use whatever the clause is that I've created. So if there was one that my office had created for us, or if I just wanted to use some of the system clauses, we can do so. Now, I don't have any quite yet. So instead, I'm just going to put in some filler. I don't really like putting in real contract stuff. You guys deal with that enough. So, do you like fruit baskets? There we go. Oh, and actually, let me do, let's put their names in there as well. Perfect. All right. And let's make sure. And we'll leave some spaces for that. Excellent. All right. So fun stuff. I don't need to talk about any contingencies and clauses and stuff. All right, now that we've got this information filled out, I'm happy with what I've got. I'm going to click on Save. And again, we can go back up to the transaction forms and move to the next form that we need. But instead, if I'm actually ready, if I've just finished all my work, I can click that Save and Exit button to just kind of finalize all my information, or click the Save and whatever. But instead of actually going back to that list that we just saw, where it's the transaction dashboard, blah, 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 I'm going to click on Transaction Forms, check these checkboxes over on the right-hand side. That fills up a basket. And from there, I can actually start up my signing. And my signing will be with all three of these forms. I did want to point one thing out before we actually navigate away from this. If I'm looking at a particular form and I see this sign, send to new AuthentiSign, this is just going to take whatever form I happen to be on and send that one form to the signing. If I click on Transaction Forms, check my checkboxes, and start the signing from here, it's going to be starting it with all three of these at once, which is typically what people would want. So send a new AuthentiSign. And this begins the process of actually getting the signatures put in, all the details for signers to participate in, interact with. All of that information will be done from here. Now, the interface has changed pretty dramatically. So for those of you guys who had been using Transaction Desk for the last few years, as of a year or two ago, I think, they recently changed it so that it's very different layout. Up at the very top of the screen, we're actually going to have a section where we can put in the name that we're wanting this to be signed with. This is a very important element. In fact, actually something that we very frequently recommend to people on service desk calls. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to clear up the Hamilton, because they don't need to be reminded that they're the ones signing this time, and clear out OREC because that doesn't matter. But the signing that I'm actually trying to send off right now is actually the listing agreement. So I can kind of trim that up a little bit. Now, you guys might not always be so lucky that it actually put in something that makes sense up in the top here. You may end up just wanting to clear this out. Just say listing agreement, Hamilton's, or something like that. Whatever the case may be, make sure that it's something that's actually going to make sense to you. I'm fond of just making sure that I've got the address that's going to be done and whatever the purpose of the signing was going to be. So in this case, again, the listing agreement. Now that we've got that, we can see down here below the signing name is going to be all of the different forms or documents that we've added to this. We can scroll up and down to see all of those. But one notable thing, and something that freaks people out whenever we end up having someone start a signing, they'll get in here and they'll be like, wait a second, I don't see any content in here. Part of the reason why it doesn't show anything quite yet is because I actually have to define over here on the right-hand side who my signers are going to be. So who's actually going to be interacting with this. Now, when I click on Add Participants, I can add myself in there. I can add somebody completely new, not recommended, or we can use this Add from Transaction. This is the easiest option. So what I'm going to see is I've got my two different people. They're already marked as sellers, so I don't have to like go in there and like choose what category they need to sign as. And then I just click Select. Now that I've gotten them added, there's going to be some color coding given to each of them, so we can actually see that information from here. Alex is going to be the yellow, Elizabeth is blue, and would you look at that? Here's Alex's signature block, already marked with the yellow, and Liz's marked with the blue. If I scroll down a little bit further, I can see the same thing goes for my lead-based paint disclosure, but on my blank addendum, because the seller information was not what necessarily had to be put into these, I'm going to have to manually add that content in there. Now, before we go putting in signature blocks or anything else like that, we need to make sure that we have all of our documents that we want, and that's going to be under the Docs section. Oh, actually, nope, I'm skipping ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Before we get to the docs, once we've gotten our people added, so after the add participants, they got the color coding, we see all of their signatures, I'm going to click on this button here to the right. This is where we can define some extra information. So for instance, if we didn't put in the email address when we initially added the contact, we can add that in here. Make sure that you check this checkbox to take this information and save it backwards. But We can make some changes there. We can also add in a signing pin. Now, one of the things that you guys might have noticed when we were adding in these two different sellers and their contact information was that I used the same email address for both individuals. For those of you guys who are using .loop, that's specifically not allowed. In this case, since I did send, or I am going to be sending the same email address, 2 different signing requests, one for the two different individuals, I want to add in an extra layer of security to ensure that only Alex signs as himself. He's going to get 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to switch over to Elizabeth and give her a signing pin of her own, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, obviously, this is just examples, so please don't actually use 1, 2, 3, 4 or something really obvious like that, because somebody might guess that. But put in a pin that's going to make sense, deliver that to them in a secure fashion so that only Alex has his pin and only Elizabeth has her pin. One last option on here, if you guys are looking at the contact information, is we can put in the customizations for their signature or their initials. So like maybe Liz wants to actually have LH for her custom initials. But beyond that, everything else should be set. So I can hit save and we're good to go. He's got his save. All right. Now we can move on to the docs. So the docs is where we're going to be able to double check that we've gotten all of our forms that we want and in the correct order that we want. So like if I needed my blank addendum to be the second one that we sign, we can move those around with these little handles. And then if there's something that I've added to my transaction, or maybe hadn't even added to my transaction quite yet, there is an add a document or form. This is going to default over to seeing any of the things that I had already added. So for instance, that filed plat, I wanted to make sure that this is something that they have access to or at least aware of. So I'm going to click this add button. This now adds that new document to the bottom of my transaction. So I can see that down here at the very bottom. And we're all set to go. If we do need to make any adjustments to this, we can actually take a look at this right now, but there's not really too much that we can do. But I've got everything. It's all in the order that I want it to be. So now we can actually move on to how we're going to be adding in all sorts of interactions for our participants. So I'm going to click on Tools on the right, and we're going to see a drop down up here at the top that allows us to switch between either myself, all of our signers, or either Alex specifically or Liz specifically. Once we've chosen who we're going to be adding these blocks for, we have these signer actions underneath where we can add in a signature block, initials, a line for them to put in text, a checkbox, initial pages, which is going to add stuff to a whole bunch of pages all at once, an initial choice, which is going to be the multiple choice option, or radio choice, which is an even simpler one. And then they recently added something called drop down. I'm going to just go through some basics real quick here. So let's say I needed to put in a signature block down here for Alex. I'm going to click and drag and just drop that into place. When I've dropped this in there, the default option is going to include a date. So I can move that date wherever I would like after it's been dropped. If I wanted to add in a signature block for Liz, though, I need to actually switch over to her name first and then click and drag. And we're set. Now, in this particular situation, I've already added in their names underneath there. Let's say that I had forgotten that. There is a signer field option where we can just click and drag to move that onto the screen. But there's also another option for these signature blocks. Let's say that you guys actually moved a signature block somewhere and it was missing the name underneath that signing line. When you click on the signature block itself, it's going to come up with some options where we can adjust how large it is, or we can actually say, I want the date stamp, which notice is already pinned, already got that on there, or we want to add in a name block. And notice when we check or turn the toggle on for the name block, it just automatically dumps the name underneath it. So for instance, down here, if I didn't have Liz's name showing up underneath there already, I can check the checkbox for name box or name block, and it automatically dumps it under there for me. Easy peasy. All right. And actually, if you guys do end up deleting any of these, either by hitting that trash can or hitting the delete button over here on the right, it actually just gets rid of all of the parts and pieces that were connected to it. Whereas if I move a signature block or a signer field, excuse me, and then delete the signature, it'll leave that other portion that was moved manually. But I'm doing a lot here, so I'm just going to dump that back in, put the date back where I need it. All right, now let's talk about the initials. The initials are going to just be the simple option to just put in an initial wherever you need it to be. Notice whenever we added that, it automatically shows us as a required field. If I click on this, I can turn that required off. Now it doesn't have that red block around it. Turn that back on. You can put in name blocks, timestamp, date stamp, all sorts of extra functions. But in my case, I don't need it right there. Instead, let's actually switch over now to the initial choice. Because initial choice is going to be the same thing as the initials block, but instead it's a multiple choice option. This is a perfect situation for us to use for the seller disclosure. So I'm going to move this initial choice over. There we go. And let's actually make this smaller since it's a little bit excessively large. And then I can move these into position. There we go. So now she's going to have to choose one or the other, but whatever one she chooses is actually going to now include her initials instead of it just being a random checkbox or radio box. Now, we also have a section down here for us to put in text. So if I needed to, I can actually add in a text line. Now, the text information is actually not for us to add details to this. It's actually meant for the client to add it. And in fact, that's actually part of the reason why we'll see where it says LH add text. Is it's going to ask for Elizabeth to actually put in the text that she would like. Now, the next section down, we've got another either or option for me to use. Instead of using the initial choice this time, I'm just going to use the default, which is the radio choice. Now, when we drop this, you notice that this time it actually came up with the number 2. I'm going to move this initial choice out of the way so we can see each time you guys add a multiple choice, there's going to be a little number that gets assigned to it. So these 2 that I added earlier have a number 1 next to them. The next ones that I added, the radio choice, multiple choice, added number 2. And this will continue that way, number 3, number 4, and so on. Now, the good news is that whenever you guys have actually added in something like this, if you delete one of them, it should, if you delete one of the last 2, if there were more options on here, like if we had multiple choice, we can add in more choices on there. But as we start deleting them, once we get to the final 2, it'll just have that one button left. I apologize. That is supposed to delete both of them. Well, I got to send an email about that. Anyway, one of the things that we have access to is going to be a checkbox. This is going to be great if you guys need some kind of like acknowledgement where it's not something that necessarily needs, obviously in this case, initials. But if we just needed to put in a checkbox of like, do you agree to these terms? You check the checkbox, good to go. But another option that they've recently added is going to be initial pages. I really like the initial pages because it simplifies a process that used to require me to go, all right, I'm going to drag the initials over here, and then I need to switch to the next person, and then drag the initials over for him, and maybe they're lined up, maybe they're not. I don't know how I managed to get those lined up perfectly on the first go, but anyway, instead of having to go through that whole manual process, let's just do initial pages. We get to choose what size we're going to want the pages to be initialed with. We get to choose where we want them to be, whether left, right, or center, top or bottom. I'm going to say small, right, top of the document. And I get to choose who's going to have their signatures added. So we can just do Alex on all of them, or if Elizabeth was the one that needed to double check everything, because Alex is notoriously bad at that or whatever, we can just choose one or the other. But I'm going to do both. And I'm actually going to choose specific pages of the specific documents I want them to put their initials on. So I'm going to choose the OREC one, do the first one, 1 through 3, and then we'll do disclosure of lead-based paint. It's only 1 page, don't have to worry about that. And finally, the Sanders Grove filed plat. So when I actually click place initials, it's going to automatically put all of that information on there. Now, their signatures are already on this one, so I don't need that. Not going to appear on that page, but page 3, 2, and 1 all have those on there. Now, you're still going to end up with situations like what we got here where, it's kind of in the way. So I can move that up a little bit to make sure that those are out of the way for me. And then a little bit further down, I've got on my filed plat. Oh, where is it? Hey, there it is. I can, again, move these if I needed to. And again, if we need to make any further adjustments, like if I wanted to say this is going to need to be much larger because we're looking at a gigantic document, I can expand those and reposition them if need be. But I don't have to manually go through and change everybody's names and add the different initial blocks, blah, 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 blah. So much easier. All right. We are actually at the top of the hour. So before we finish this whole process and finish up the tools, let's actually take a 10-minute break. What that means is I'm going to be putting the video back on the screen. This is going to be playing the whole time for the 10 minutes. And I'm also going to be playing the music again. If you guys hear the music stop or the video is no longer on the screen, we're going to be getting started again. But it's almost 10:03, so I will see you guys back here at 10:13. Make sure you guys get back here. We will poll you guys to make sure that you're present. If you are not present, you will not receive CE credit. So again, 10:13 is when we'll be back. just immediately dumped it. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's go ahead and do our little CE requirement. If everyone could hit that raise hand button for me. Just need to make sure everybody returned. I think I saw you flash your hand, Brandon, but if you could just hit it, leave it just so I can, I'm just taking a screenshot just so we have it on record. But yeah, Brandon, Sarah, if you guys wouldn't mind, hit that raise hand button for me. I'll give you guys a little bit here to do so. But anyway, John also asked a question while we were gone. As far as the initial blocks on each page, it's not necessarily something that I believe is required, but it could be helpful. That might be something that you may need to do on a kind of case-by-case basis. But I would suggest actually asking your broker about that, just in case that might be something that might benefit you guys in the future. But one last opportunity, Brandon, Sarah, if you guys can hear me, hit that raise hand button. If you don't, I won't be able to give you guys CE credit. Oh, I see you, Sarah. All right, I'm fairly certain. All right, well, let's get back to it. All right, so where we left off, we were looking at our tools. We had just added some initial blocks using the initial pages. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the drop-down. Now, I'm going to move back up to my blank addendum. On the blank addendum, I had an option here, are you allergic to any fruits? Now, we've got a couple different ways for us to handle something like this. Again, don't take this as something that you actually are going to need to do in the future. Just try and abstract what we're going to be talking about. I have a space here that I need somebody to put in a piece of information for me. Typically, I can just go ahead and drag in something that just says, add text here. They can put in whatever they want. But let's say that we have a limited amount of choices that we would like to provide them, and they need to choose one of those choices. That's when we get into the drop-down option. So I'm going to switch over to Liz, drag that drop-down over here. What the drop-down does, notice it automatically changed my information over here. Drop-down is going to allow me to now say, I want this to be, fruit allergies. There we go. And then I'm going to put down here each of the different options that I would like for them to have access to. So under define options, we're going to say apples, oranges. One of the most tragic allergies to me would be strawberry. Oh, and mangoes. I love mangoes. And you know what? I need to eat more in the morning because then I come into these webinars hungry. Anyway, we've got a couple options here. And let's also add a none just to make sure. I'm going to just do select as the default option, and we are going to require this. So I'm going to do the same thing for Alex's text line. We're going to require that. And I've got a couple extra spaces that I still need to fill in here. Instead of doing the initial choice, I'm just going to use the radio buttons and do yes or no. Let's do it this way, I guess. Perfect. And Alex. Radio choice, yes or no. Oh, I just lined it up perfectly. Excellent. All right, so I've got all my paperwork filled out. I am now ready to get this sent off to be signed. But before we actually leave this, I wanted to address a couple things that will make you guys' lives much easier in the future. So we've started off with getting all of our signers added. We added in all of our docs and forms. We went through and used all of the tools to get the signers' information put in. If there was anything else that I needed to add, I've got text box options, I've got highlight options, lines, freehand. You can make it just a nice mess on there if you wanted to. Add in any text that might have been missing. Of or whatever. This can be contractual obligations. This could be details that you guys forgot to fill out on the form, add information to documents, whatever the case may be. Use this sparingly. I would suggest getting all of that stuff added before, but once we've gotten everything added that we need to under the tools, there's a layouts option that you guys will have access to that allows you to take whatever the content is that you guys have been putting in and save that for future use. So remember earlier we were talking about how some of these blank text spaces allow you guys to actually go through and add in a clause, or even to just save something that you guys have added as a clause. Now, because I might be using that same clause on this particular form over and over again, I'm going to want to have the same level of interactivity on each time, and something I preferably don't have to keep on adding over and over again. So under layouts, we can actually create a layout based on the information that we have right here. So under blank addendum, I'm going to say fruit basket plus allergies. There we go, and hit create. And what that's going to do is take all of the content that I have saved on that particular page. So even the details about like, all right, I've got a signature block here that's going to have whoever the seller's name is down there, so that by the time I actually come back, so let's say that I've got all this cleared out, there's nothing on this page, I didn't add any text, I didn't add any multiple choice, deleted all of those with the delete key. I'm going to come back to layouts, apply layout. Under my blank addendum option, I'm going to see a whole bunch of different things on there. The one that I'm looking for is fruit basket plus allergies. When I select this and do assign signature layouts, it's going to apply all of those same fields that I just saw before. So saves us a lot of time, a lot of trouble. We don't have to worry about it duplicating things on other pages or anything like that. Just adds it into this one specific area. So really strongly recommend that you guys use those saved clauses. This is another thing that the templates can save for you, as well as making sure that all these forms are in the same thing, and then you got the same clauses, and then you got the same layouts. All of that automation is going to make your life much easier by the time you actually are trying to put all of this knowledge to practice. But the last thing on here, besides just a feedback button if you guys want to make suggestions or whatever, there's an options section. This is where you guys can change your own signature if you need to. There's also a signing details, which is literally just the signing name, which we've already adjusted. The expiration dates and the reminders are also going to be parts and pieces of our final step of sending this off. So we actually don't even need to visit it for that either. So if I'm not signing, if I've already adjusted my name, I'm going to be putting in the expiration and the reminders when I finalize this process. So you may not even necessarily need to visit the options. The only thing that might be of any value is changing where the Authentisign ID will show up. This is going to be the effectively the receipt number that's going to be applied to every single document. I'm going to put mine down at the bottom left just because I like it on the bottom of the page. And then I hit Save Changes. Now, options, again, not something that you need to visit, but once I've completed all the stuff that I've been working on, there's a print option if I just want to send it to the printer and get it printed manually. I can download everything that I've saved. It doesn't keep any of the signature blocks or any of the interaction, but it'll at least get all of the forms and documents put together. I can save what I've been working on in case I get interrupted. I haven't sent this off and I need to jump back into this later. But instead, I'm just going to click this Next button. This finalizes the process of all of this signature information that I have. I get to choose what my expiration date will be. I want to say today for sure. And then I'm also going to choose, let's send a reminder every 1 day, and we'll make sure that it gets sent off about 10 a.m. Let them sleep in a little bit. All right. Now, once we've gotten our expiration and reminders put in, there's one last step before we have to send, or before we can send this off, and that's going to be customize invites. Now, what customize invites allows us to do is actually customize this for each person that we're going to be sending this to. Now, if we wanted to, like if we had set this up under the signers section to be in a specific signing order, I might need to make sure that Hamilton actually knows, please sign immediately. Now, we didn't set it up with the option to require that this is going to be one person signs and then the next person signs. I actually prefer the option that just sends it to everybody at once. They sign it at their leisure and we're good to go. Oftentimes, if you have like one person sign and then the next person sign, it just stops people up a little bit. But if I need to make sure that that point is being illustrated, let's see, Liz can't sign until you do. Perfect. And I'm going to leave hers on the boilerplate text just so we can see what it looks like when it's been customized and what it looks like when it's just generic. So save, send. Now this will be on its way to our client. Now, just one last step before we actually take a look at what it actually looks like from the client's perspective. When we get done with the sending, it brings us back to, again, our transaction. And over here on the side, we've gone to the signings section. Now, the signings section is where you can effectively just keep track of what exactly is happening with each signing that you guys have started. So for instance, in this case, I can see my signing. I can click on it. I can see who's going to be participating. If I needed to make adjustments to their email addresses, I can do so from here. I can resend to any of my unsigned participants. And over here to the right, we can reset the entire process, which actually brings us back to square one. We're actually back in the editing process. We can duplicate this in case maybe this process didn't get done. I need to start it over from scratch, or I could just delete it. But in my case, I'm actually happy with what I got. I know it's already been sent off to the right people, and I can check my participants over here to the side to see how many of the participants have completed it, and hold my cursor over the show participants to show me the checkboxes on those who have completed it. In this case, neither of them. Now, let's actually take a look at what this looks like from the client's perspective. Now, I can't stress this enough. When you guys are actually using our systems, give them a play, like try them out, find out what exactly works for you, how things are going to be functioning, what is going to be beneficial for you as far as like how you guys are sending things off to be signed, etc. But in my case, I've already sent myself bunches of signings to just see how they work. So I know what this is going to look like from the client's end. Now, when we first pull up the email address on the client's end, oh my God, it removed the ad. Thank you. I don't want any right now. But when we get this email, this is the one that got sent to Alex. If he was the only one that was supposed to be seeing this, it's going to say, please sign immediately. It's going to have his start signing button. And when he clicks on that, would you look at that? It's asking for a PIN. I'm going to go ahead and put in the PIN that I gave him. Hit OK. I accept. And it just dives directly into it. Now, there's a couple important notes, and this is, again, another reason why I would recommend that you guys go through the process of actually sending yourself something to sign, just so you know what this looks like. Up at the very top of the page, there's going to be a section here that says progress, blank percentage, 0 out of 10 items completed. So they'll know exactly how many things they still need to do in case they get hung up along the way. Now, once they need to start this process, there's a couple different ways for them to do so. If they don't have limited mobility or any kind of difficulties using technology, they can actually just start clicking on things. The first time they click on one, it's going to ask them what kind of signature they would like to use. Alex probably likes a nice haphazard looking late 80s, early 90s handwritten font. Just click my way through, and would you look at that? Happy. What's an obscure fruit? Dragon fruit. Okay. Get my last signature in there, last initials, and I'm done. Sometimes that's all they need is just to click their way through things and they're good to go. In my case, I actually want to make a change. It's going to start me back up to the top. So let's say that they actually don't have the best time using a computer, whether there's some kind of mobility issues or whether there's just, a little bit of a knowledge gap. Whatever the case may be, if they just want to kind of get their way through this without having to, do too much clicking, hitting the space bar will actually put those signatures in for them. So I'm just hitting the space bar. I'm not even moving my mouse. If I want to hit tab to get to the next one, dragon fruit. There we go. Tab, space, space, done. Very easy. Again, didn't even have to move my cursor, didn't have to do anything but hit that keyboard a bunch of times. So it makes it a lot easier now to be able to navigate through this kind of stuff and finish it. Then the only thing they actually have to do is hit the button that says complete signing. Now, if they don't, it'll show them their progress. Again, if they have not finished the actual signing, there's going to be a next and back button you may have noticed up here. Once they're actually done, then they can click this finish button and it's it. Complete signing, we're all set. And it gives them their new receipt number effectively. Now, this receipt number is actually very important. I don't know if you guys were using Transaction Desk before 2020, but for whatever reason, there was a lot of the lenders, one specifically in Bartlesville that I heard of, that for whatever reason would not actually accept Transaction Desk signings. These are legally binding signings. This is not something that's, that insecure. So there's no reason for them to kind of harangue you guys for this now, and especially post 2020, most people have gotten past the hurdle of thinking that digital signings and digital stuff is bad, and now they're just accepting it. But if you guys do end up having somebody that's still questioning that, or they just want to, know that this is authentic sign, we have that signing ID. The signing ID is going to be directly tied to a server on AuthentiSign's side that allows us to know all sorts of details about what exactly was signed, when it was signed, how it was signed, what the IP address was, what the email address was, blah, 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 blah. Just tons of information. So if there is any question to the authenticity of this particular signing or whether it's a legally binding contract, this number is going to tie directly back to that. All right, now he's done on his end. So I'm going to take us out of full screen, jump back, and now let's move on to her signing. Now, when we were looking at his initially came through with, again, that custom signature or a custom subject. And then in the body, there was an additional message section here where we got to say, Liz can't sign until you do. Wasn't exactly true in our case, but on Liz's, this is again just the boilerplate text. So you guys can see your signature is requested. It shows me the signing name. And down here, no additional message. We can just dive directly into start signing. Now, again, just like last time with Alex, it's going to ask for a PIN. Always make sure that you guys are delivering your PIN in whatever is going to be the most secure method for that client, whether you guys have to give them a phone call or whatever the case may be. But I got hers put in, hit OK, I accept. Again, first step whenever they get in here is going to be to click on one of these fields and then choose what signature they want to use. They can draw it or they can upload it. This one seems really insecure to me, but not insecure in a like emotional way, insecure in a way that like, oh, I got a little signature of my a file of my signature. That just seems like you're asking for somebody to steal it. Anyway, she likes this nice little cursive one. So set signature. Go ahead and click my way through or hit the space bar to navigate through. Oh, and I got to choose between these. So I'm going to say, oh, actually, you know what? Here, we'll just do that. None, none, boom, good to go. Oh, she's allergic to strawberries. What a tragedy. And we're all set. Complete signing. Now, she should be getting the exact same code that Alex got. These codes are actually assigned to the signing as a whole, so not to individuals that are participating within the signing. This is literally going to be all of those forms, all those documents are compiled into one signing name with one signing ID. So it makes it very easy to keep track of this. Now, once they've actually completed their signing process, there's a really handy feature. It's automatically going to be sending them the signing information so that we actually get, Alex got his copy, she's going to end up receiving her own copy, where they can download all of the signed documents all at once. And they can also get the signing certificate that effectively validates that this is an authentic signing, that this was, legally binding, blah, 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 blah. If they need that, here's the certificate to get that. And then they also can download each of the individual documents that have the signatures on them. Same thing goes with the certificates. They can get each of their individual certificates. And again, this is going to be sent off to each individual that participated. So if you guys do end up in a situation where, you got people with 2 different email addresses, they will both receive their own email at their own email address. In my case, Liz and Alex are both going to end up receiving, oh, back to my inbox. Here we go. Yeah. And Liz got her own. So nice and easy. All right. Now, again, this was all from the perspective of the people who are participating. Just close out of that. And now that I'm back in Transaction Desk, let's say that I navigated back into my transaction, clicked on my signings. Hey, would you look at that? I've got my signing here. I got my 2 participants, and now I can actually see those little green check boxes indicating that it's been completed. It even shows me completed. If this needed to be redone, I can always click on the name, go up here, duplicate, and I can start that whole signing process over from scratch. But if it's anywhere along the process and not completed, we'll still have that option to reset. Oh, and also to resend to anybody that hasn't signed yet, as we saw earlier. All right. Now that we've gotten all this done, I wanted to point something out. Keep track of this name, again, the address and then listing agreement, because everything that we just had signed by our clients is not going to appear back in the forms. Again, these are still interactive. I can still get these filled out differently and then send it off to my client. Instead, I'm actually going to go over to the documents. So there is effectively kind of a workflow here. We fill out the details, we get the contact information, we grab the forms that we want, get everything sent off to be signed. And now that it's been signed, under the documents section, we have a folder that's been set up. Again, address, listing agreement, and it even shows the exact minute that this particular signing was completed. This folder contains not only all of the different forms and documents that were signed, but it also contains a separate folder that shows the certificates as well. So again, if some lender or somebody is like, that's not a legally binding contract, it's signed on a computer. Okay, well, here's your certificate validating that this is real. Now, beyond that, I also wanted to point out that each of the different signed documents now has a little padlock to the left of it, indicating that this is actually a certified and digitally signed document. If we wanted to take a look at any of these, we can click on them and it'll show us, hey, there's their signature. And remember how we moved the Authentisign ID? This was that receipt number that we saw earlier. It is now appearing down at the bottom left. In case any of you guys are worried about your computer messing up or something, it's fuzzy on my screen too. It's just a low-res version of this. But we can zoom in, zoom out. We can flip the documents that might be needing to get flipped. We can make some markups to this. So let's now transition from how we were getting everything filled out to now talking about the documents and how we can interact with them. So I'm going to start off here with our filed plat that we had. Let's say that it was kind of bugging me that this was actually not scanned properly. I've got a document that at the moment is actually vertical when it needs to be horizontal. When I click on that document, again, we get a whole bunch of options up here at the top. I'm going to hit this rotate left, and now it'll adjust it so that it's in the right position, right orientation. If I close out of it and open it back up, oh, did I not save? That's new. Usually it saves that. Anyway, over here on the right-hand side, we also have the option to just dive directly into the slice/markup. Let's actually talk about the slice first. So I'm going to go into a multi-page document like the listing agreement, go in here to the slice/markup and choose slice. So let's say, and actually this is a real life example from literally yesterday, somebody wanted to take the very first page and separate that out and email it to someone. So what they can do is when they're in this document slicer, select the page or pages that you would like to use, and then hit Save up at the top right. This is going to allow us to save this as a new separate document with just the selected pages in mind. And I can say listing agreement, page 1. Perfect. Hit Save. And now I have a separate document that's just this page. Now, another cool thing about this, actually here, let me do one more version of that. Another cool thing about this is that let's say that we actually have a scanned document, and that scanned document, for whatever reason, it was supposed to only scan one side of the page. Lo and behold, it scanned both sides of the page. When you guys get into here, you can go over to the menu, do the slice/markup again. And when you're just looking at this screen in general, so not selecting multiple pages and saving it as a separate document, if I just need to take this second page and delete it, boom, done. Easy peasy. And then save. We'll save that document and we're all set. So it makes it way easier to just get anything that you guys had scanned, whether it was scanned perfectly or whether it was scanned with some errors in it. You guys can make those adjustments after the fact. Also, that Sanders Grove one, if we just go in there and do the slice/markup, slice, select the page, rotate it, save, now we're good to go. It's worth mentioning, anytime you guys make any of those changes, you'll notice on here that we now have some unlocked things. So we've got the certified and digitally signed, but wait a second, this one is no longer certified and digitally signed because we made some adjustments to it. The same thing goes with our Sanders Grove. As soon as I did that little rotate option, it's no longer saved as a certified and digitally signed document, despite the fact that if I click on this, I've got their signatures there. So really easy to keep track of whether or not there's been some fishy behavior, so to speak. All right. Next thing we need to discuss is going to be the document markup. Now, there's a couple different things to keep in mind with this. When you guys are actually going through and using that slice/markup and instead use the markup option, this is going to allow us to add in any text that we might have missed. So for instance, if I just needed to type in something up at the top here, I can move that around into the right position. We also have a free draw where you can circle things that you might need. Definitely don't want that. Just undo that. There we go. We've also got an ellipses, a rectangle, a regular old highlight, a line option, and a redact one, which is actually really handy. Now, there's also some options that you guys don't have access to on this document markup side that when you guys are actually working with a form, for instance, you will have access to. So that markup option, again, is just under the slice/markup. But if you guys are working with forms, there is also a markup option when you guys are in the edit phase of the form. And it's going to be, come on. It's going to be up at the top with that same little painter's palette icon. So we can go through and actually say, I don't want this line. Don't want the next line down. Or if I just want to say I want to redact this whole portion here, we can add all of that in with this markup option. Or if there's text missing, same thing goes as last time. I needed to add in some text or something like that, and then move that into the right position. Now, we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but just to circle back around to it, since it was kind of an offhanded comment. If you guys do end up in a situation where you need to make some changes to a form and you just noticed that when you arrived to the signing phase, you can make those adjustments and put that markup or whatever the case may be onto that page, but that's not going to save that content backwards to the form. So for instance, if I had gone through and marked up one of the forms with some extra stuff, it's not going to show that back when I get back to that form later. So if you do end up wanting something that's going to stay on that form and carry over into any signings you guys do with that form, You have to do it from this form editing interface. All right, let's get out of that. Now, there's a couple of things that we are not going to be covering. That's going to be our checklists and tasks. I've noticed that not everybody is using those, but I can't stress enough how valuable they could be. In case there's something that you guys have noticed along the way that you would like to learn more about, there is a question mark up at the top here that allows you guys to go to our effectively support page. It gives our phone number up at the top and our email address, but the online training, the feedback, the guides, the videos, pre-recorded webinars, all of this is actually content that Lone Wolf has put together. So if I'm being transparent with you guys, most of the stuff that I've learned about Transaction Desk came from either just a webinar that I had attended of theirs or the guides, which is what I've pretty much filled all of the gaps on my knowledge on Transaction Desk with. So how to move transactions as a broker, or how to, take a document and put it into another transaction. All of that information is found under the guides. Strongly recommend taking a look at that. But now let's actually move over from our discussion of a specific transaction. And let's now talk about the transaction templates and the clauses and the other things that you guys can save. I'm going to expand this section over here on the left, and we can see dashboard, transactions, so on and so forth. Here is a section here for clauses. This is again going to be broken down into the stuff that I have made personally, people in my office have made for me, and then the system clauses one, which suspiciously is empty. We, I guess, didn't end up getting any from Lone Wolf, and I don't think they've even bothered starting to fill that in. So that's empty at the moment. So the only ones that you guys should see with any content are going to be the personal and office clauses. If you guys do end up needing to add one, select the section and then click add. For those of you guys who have office level permission, when you get into the office clauses, there will be an add button. So those of you who are brokers or admins for your office should see that. Now, clauses, pretty situational. The templates, on the other hand, are not. So I'm going to click again on this templates button. So it's the one with the little gear icon with the autofill button down there. Templates. There is a checklist manager. If you guys are going to be using the checklists, this is how you guys can create those, edit those, do all the stuff that you might need. But in my case, I need the transaction templates. Now, the transaction templates are going to allow you guys to take all the forms and documents that you might need and add those in, so that instead of having to manually go through and find all of the different forms, find all the different documents, add in specific contacts, whatever you guys might need to do, you guys can actually just do that from square one using a template. Now, I'm going to circle back around to this so that we can actually see what it looks like whenever you take a template that you've created and use it from square one. But when you guys show up to this particular page, if you see any that show a little double head here, right now it's just showing the single head, the agent ones, those are my individual ones. If you see one that has two people here, that's one that the office has created. And again, for those of you guys who have office level permission, when you hit this add button, there will be another section here that says ownership, where you can choose either personal or office. But for all of you guys, whenever you click that add button, we're going to give this a name, residential listing packet in my case. And since I'm going to be doing specifically a residential listing, would you look at that, I'm just going to go ahead and choose my type from square one. When we've added in the name, given it a type, I'm going to hit save. And this is where it starts us off on the process of adding in what checklists we need, what contacts we want on this, any documents, or even the folder hierarchy I can build in advance, add in any forms, or even just choose who I want to share this with. So for instance, if this was specifically my team, there we go, update that. Wait. Oh, it does have, okay, there we go. I can add in any of my teammates onto this. I know that there are some groups in Tulsa, despite the MLS's best wishes, that add in all of their listings under a specific individual's names. You guys can actually do that under the contact section, but I did want to clarify, this contact section is typically not going to serve you very well. If you guys do have certain people that are always going to need to be a part of your transaction, that's fine. You can click on Add Contact to put them into there. We have seen more people having issues with contacts on templates than we have people being successful with the contacts. Prime example was the first call I got ever about the templates. Somebody was using a template. They had built that template for a very specific transaction, like a month or so before, and that particular transaction had a specific contact on it. Now, she saved all the information for that particular transaction template, and then when she was trying to use it again, over and over and over again, it kept on adding that same contact, and she had to keep on deleting it from every transaction because that was not the person she was interacting with. So typically, you're not going to be using that transaction contacts, but you might be using a lot of the documents and folders. So over here to the right, we've got an add folder or document. If you guys would like to, you guys can set up a folder in advance for inspections, or if you guys wanted to put something in there for add folder for disclosures, or whatever it is that you guys need, you guys can build that hierarchy out in advance. You can also just go in there and add specific documents. So for instance, if you guys did have a specific company document that you guys wanted to use, you can just add in that. It can be a PDF, it can be a Word document. There's a bunch of different ways that you guys can add those in. And again, for those of you guys who have an office that's been storing all of that on some third-party server, like OneDrive or Google Drive, you guys can access those from here. In fact, actually, there was a office in Eufaula that uses Google Drive, and this was a huge help, being able to add all of those into the transaction template and just grab whatever their current version of the forms were so that they could have that on each transaction they made. So nice and easy. Last thing to mention is going to be the forms. Again, forms allows us to see all of the different forms that are available in the system. So if you guys ended up needing to put in a specific grouping of those forms so that you don't have to manually go through and find them every single time, we can just go through, get all of the documents that I need, all the forms that I need, add those in there, and we're set. Now, I'm just clicking random ones, but if you guys do end up having a specific grouping that you would like to use, you can add all of those at once. There is, just so you guys are aware at least, a couple different schools of thought on how to actually create the transaction templates. There's a office, I think, out in Ada that they actually went through and had a residential listing packet for specifically auctions. And so there was a bunch of forms that were specific to auctions that they added into that so that they would have that information for just that particular kind of transaction. There was another office that I worked with, actually not too far from where I live on Cherry Street. And what they had done is they had an all-in-one. So they had actually created a residential listing packet that included all the forms, all the documents that you could ever need for a residential listing. And then that way you have everything just in case you might need it. And if you don't, you can just delete it from that one transaction and it does not affect the template at all. So either do like an all-in-one, a situational, or any combination really thereof. It's your template. So make sure this is set up the way that you guys would like it. The last thing to mention is whenever you guys have actually made any changes to documents that you've added or any of these forms even, like if I was actually doing a auction, just mention this, auction only, and there was a certain portion of this contract that was actually not going to be applicable, I can actually save that redacted portion as part of the actual transaction template, so that when I add this particular form to my transaction in the future, the template will come baked in with this redacted portion already a part of that transaction's forms. So it makes it way easier to try and kind of like get everything ready so that when you actually start a transaction, the only thing you have to do is fill in some details and then move on. You don't have to go through and find forms. You don't have to go through and fill them all out. It's just going to be some details that you need to grab, put it all in there, make sure everything is correct, and then send it off to be signed. Easy peasy. But let's save and exit. And we are all set. So I've got my transaction template all set up. I'm going to head back to my transaction dashboard. And let's say that I'm new day, new transaction, new sellers. I'm going to start a new transaction. Template test. I'm going to use my transaction template. Here's my team one. Import data. Maybe we'll do one from the MLS. Add myself as the listing agent, which was automatically done because it's a residential listing. And use wizard. And it just automatically grabs all the data from that listing, grabs all the template information. So I've got all my forms, all my documents. So by the time I'm actually starting up this process, I barely have to put anything in. I'm going to go next. I've already got the list date put in there. Go next. I've already got my listing agent from the other side. In case I'm importing from previous one, I can take him off since he's not the listing agent now. Take them off as well. And we're all set. If I get to my next, here's all my forms. And in fact, even on that last one where I had my transaction form that I was going to be editing with the redacted portion, I don't even have to go back and add that. It's already there for me. So the transaction templates, I really can't stress enough how valuable those could be to you guys. Now, one other thing to discuss, let's actually head back to our Hamilton one. Let's say that I got all my listing agreement stuff signed. I can see that that's been completed. I can check my signing, add more forms if I needed to, adjust my contacts, details, etc. I'm going to go into the forms, and let's actually now start the next step, getting this listing into the system. So first, I need to actually get the property data form. So I recommend that you guys actually use the property data form in Transaction Desk. Oh, and I forgot to actually select something. Data form, there we go. In this case, it's a residential. Check the checkbox for that. And since I'm going to have the disclosures, since this was occupied, yeah. Hey, there we go. Okay, so I've got two different versions of the property condition disclosure. I want to stress this for you guys. Agent is going to be you filling out the information, which from what I understand is not allowed. The client interactive is going to be the one that the client will be able to sign. So I'm going to add that one. We'll discuss that a little bit more in a moment. Now, first things first, I need to get that listing put into the system. So when I go to my MLS property data form for residential, I've already filled out some of this information since I already got the address, legal description, the owner's information. All that information should automatically populate on here using my listing agent information. So I just have to make a couple minor adjustments. Street, subdivision, blah, 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 blah. Tax parcel number, township range, section, county, blah, blah, blah. Get all of these details put in. Now, I'm not just going to go through and fill this in willy-nilly because this information that we're seeing right here, if you have add edit permission, there is an upload listing button that'll take all the information that you guys have filled out on this page and just directly turn this into an incomplete listing for me to use. So when I click on that upload listing, I now have a new incomplete listing waiting for me in Matrix that I can just finish the last details on. It's so much easier. And in fact, actually, for those of you guys who have like a tablet or an iPad or something like that, I would just pull this up while you guys are out. You can load Transaction Desk in the browser, find this particular form, add it to the transaction that you guys are going to be working with. Just fill this out with them. You guys can walk through the house, talk about all the details, tap on a couple things, type in a couple details, and you're done. So much easier than having to go through and get a piece of paper and fill everything out. Then you have to go back to the computer, type all that information back in. With this, hit that button, good to go. Now, last thing we need to talk about is our property condition disclosures. Now, the good news is I've already added the property condition disclosure to my transaction, and I made sure that I added in the client interactive one. I'm going to check the checkbox, click on my basket, and get this sent off to be signed. And this is where people usually start to panic. They either have clicked on that client interactive one and saw that they couldn't put any dots in, or They know that they're supposed to be using the client interactive version, and they get to this phase, and then they're like, wait a second, I still don't see any dots. Not to worry. When I click on Add Participant, Add from Transaction, and add any of my sellers, it'll automatically add all of those dots in there. Now, I did want to clarify one thing just because this is very important. Whoever you want to actually do the filling out is going to have to be the first person you add. So if I want Elizabeth to be the one that signs this, I need to add her, select, and then I can add in Alex. Okay, come on. There we go. Add from transaction. Slowly but surely. Why is my computer taking its time right now? There we go. So notice, Alex does not have any interaction with any of these other portions. Everything is in yellow, indicating that Elizabeth will be the one that actually does these signings, but it was automatically added as soon as I added in one of the sellers. So just remember that when you guys are going through and using the property condition disclosure, make sure that you are using the client interactive version. You will not be able to see any of the fields until you've started the signing and added your first seller. All right, but that is it for our class today. If you guys do end up having any questions, problems along the way, definitely get in contact with us. If you guys are looking at a listing in Matrix even, and you guys want to start a transaction just with that MLS number, there is a start a transaction icon for each and every listing, whether you guys are looking at it from the results or whether you guys are looking at it from the listing itself. There's a little start transaction icon, but any way that you guys are using Transaction Desk is probably going to be fine. If you have any problems along the way, though, just give us a call and let us know. All right. So as for our CE credit, everybody could hit that raise hand button. I think Brandon kind of jumped the gun on that one, but that's all right. Go ahead and hit that raise hand button. Don't put it back down. I just need to take another screenshot just to make sure everybody's here. But again, thank you guys so much for joining us today. If you guys have any problems, questions, errors, whatever the case may be, give us a call at the service desk. That's what we're here for. Awesome. I see everybody's hands up. Everybody should be eligible for the CE credit as long as you guys didn't get disconnected for any extended periods of time, but that should be it. Thank you guys again, and enjoy this little reprieve from that warm weather that we were having randomly. I love the rain. Very excited to go on a hike later. All right. Excellent. I'm gonna go ahead and close up shop. Have a good one, guys. Stay safe.